pretty historical biblical practice there, getting a new name as a Christian. So let's just jump into some of the shocking things. You were born, and even before being born, you were born for a purpose given by the occult. Now, we know God has a different purpose, but they tried to redefine your purpose, and you were literally dedicated to Satan and groomed to be what?
A bride of Satan.
Can you tell us more about that?
A bride of Satan is that version of a marriage. When in the real world, I'll call it. In Christian churches, you take your husband, you take your wife, you become one, you belong to each other, you live for all these things with each other. And it was the same way being a bride of Satan, but you're actually marrying Satan. No white dresses, no pretty ceremonies, no fun gathering afterwards. It was dark, disgusting. Drugs, sex, people you may or may not know, and they watch you become Satan's property pretty much.
Yeah. Now, we understand, well, I understand. I want to bring some clarity. So there's multiple brides of Satan around, quote, the world and in various areas. But if I'm understanding correctly, that is literally attaining a rank, per se, in the world of the occult. And it's not something that someone just chooses to become that. You're literally groomed, and in some cases even born and groomed to become that. Is that right?
Yeah. You don't just look at somebody and say, oh, I want to be a bride of Satan. There has to be a marking on you that there's something.
After our first or second encounter and beginning to walk her through deliverance, we came to an understanding that what's been termed SRA, or satanic ritual abuse, that she wasn't just someone in her teens got curious about Wicca and picked up a book, or just did a sacrifice here or there, but literally she was what we call satanic ritualized, and that means from early childhood was groomed in this world of the occult and began to break down many of the barriers of the mind. And during satanic ritual abuse, there's literally a form of programming that can be put into a person, trigger words, trigger colors, trigger things. So if they ever begin to come out of the occult, these things can be triggered to draw them back into the occult. Ronnie, tell us a little bit about your childhood, early childhood, growing up, about your family. I mean, they were, in my understanding, just a successful family, highly educated, somewhat influential. Give us some insight there, without mentioning their names, of course.
Right. Yeah, my mother was a nurse and my dad worked in a local museum. He had his PhD and was a well-known professor in Knoxville. Taught classes, had many students under him coming up doing work for him, and you would see them in public, and most people, knowing who they were and what their jobs were, would never suspect anything.
So they almost lived, well, I mean, I guess they did live two completely lifestyles, one for the public and one private. Tell us what that did to you as a child. I mean, growing up during the day outside being one way, and then at night, what was it like?
Confusing. You'd get up in the morning and things would be okay. You'd get up, you'd eat breakfast, just like any normal kid. And then you'd get on a bus and go to school, and you're at school for 8 hours with your friends, hanging out, doing stuff that kids do. You come home, and it kind of seemed it got worse as the day went. The sun starts going down. Those dark things would start to happen.
What kind of dark things?
There would be all kinds of people in and out of the house. A lot of them were with my mom. She would have meetings with other witches, and they would do rituals. They would go out and do things, and if I was considered to be in the way, they had to make sure that I was kind of pushed out of the way, put away until they needed me.
So you're getting up, you're having breakfast, you're going to school, everything's normal out there. You come home and people start to come to your house on certain nights. And you being a child, if she's wanting to participate in certain rituals, couldn't be interrupted. You said the term putting away. What does that mean?
A lot of times it meant there was a room we had under our stairs in the lowest part of the house, and there would be a cage that I could be locked up in, almost like a dog, treated like a dog. And that would sometimes be used for punishment if I said something to somebody or if I got in the way.
If you said something about
the occult or what was going on, there was weird people in the house. There was chantings or different things going on that were scaring me. If I even breathed the word to somebody and they found out about it, I'd be put back in that cage.
Yeah. Now, guys, this is happening 4, 5, 6, 7 years old in these early developmental stages of life. This divided lifestyle, and it doesn't just divide your lifestyle. That literally causes breaks in the mind, and those areas of being broken down. That's where the occult really tries to instill certain ideas that you can. This is what you were born for. You will never come out of this. And they define an image of God as we know Him. They pervert that. They twist that. And then they cause young kids to do certain things that's, quote, blasphemy. And anyway, that's very... I mean, we can't imagine what that is like on a child. Tell us a little bit... when you began the process of coming out.
I had been in various churches, other reasons other than wanting to go in and listen to somebody preach to me that there's a God. At the point I really didn't care if there was a God that wasn't my God. That God was bad and stay away and destroy anything that God would do. Another church that I had gone into, I'd really seen God working through people. I'd seen sick people get better just by somebody praying for them in a service. Things on people's bodies would grow out if there was like a short arm or a short leg. I watched it happen, and it was confusing because to me that's not a good thing. But it made me think, okay, maybe there's something else out there, something going on. Maybe this really is real. That it's not just the occult going on.
Wow. So to summarize that, you're literally talking about miracles in the church is what began to open your eyes. So the actual supernatural, but from a different source, because you were very familiar with the supernatural. Just sourced in demonic power,
right.
Not by the Holy Spirit. So that began to put questions, is God real? Does He love? Does He forgive? What were some of these next steps that you processed through? Because couldn't have been just easy.
It wasn't. This last church that I had stepped into and saw this, I had kept going back. They had a live stream that I could sit and watch, and I had... But seeing things that was going on in the church from their worship and dancing, and it was, you could feel it pulling you, and you couldn't understand what is this pulling on me? Why am I interested in this? I shouldn't want anything to do with this at all. And when I had gone to this church, it actually took me 20 minutes to get from the parking lot to the front door. To open the door to walk in the church.
What were you feeling? I mean, you pull in... You've not committed your life to Christ, but this drawing of the Spirit, you're getting out. What's happening?
I felt like I was going to pass out or die, literally, from the time I made it to their front door, and everything was telling me, just get back in your car, go back home.
Everything as in?
every demon
Okay.
possible telling me, you don't want to walk in here. You have no reason to be here. Get back in your car. Go home. Forget this happened. But I took myself and made myself go through the door. And when I walked in, the entire time I heard myself, and apparently I was saying out loud, I was going, and shaking my head. And that pastor looked right at me and said, and he's like, come sit next to me.
Wow. So with all of the demonic stuff, the drawing of the Holy Spirit, and you were able to make that choice, you were going in. Mm-hmm. Then what happened?
I felt very, very uncomfortable. A lot of times, if you are sent to another church or anywhere with a purpose to destroy, you could take it in with you. And at the time, the only place that I was challenged on that was at this church. I had gotten to the front door, and it sounded like somebody told me, you can have this when you leave. And it felt like someone was taking something off my shoulders and setting it down on the porch. And I told this pastor that even if I wanted to do something, I couldn't. It wasn't going to be allowed. And I didn't understand it, and it made me mad.
Mm. Now, you said a phrase there, I was sent to this church. Elaborate just a little bit. Sent for what purpose? By who?
Sent to the church to release, I don't know that I want to say spells or anything, but there's just a release of working against anything godly.
Well, that is actually a spell.
Yeah. And to release, to destroy the church, and the purpose there, they were becoming a little bit of a threat. Just because they weren't so formal.
Yeah.
There was more liberty. They did things that a lot of churches don't do. There's a
the
lot
moving of the Holy Spirit, God manifesting himself in signs, wonders, miracles.
And being that it was close to home, it needed to come down.
Wow. Guys, I want you to hear what's being said. Now, Ronnie's a completely different person today, but the spirits in her and the people of the occult began to know, just become aware supernaturally that this church, and this is not our church, this is another church in our region, that this church was moving in the things of the Spirit. God was manifesting himself in a supernatural form. Right there, guys, what she's talking about, there are varying levels of deliverance, and the depth of the occult and the satanic ritual abuse that Ronnie had gone through as a child for 36 years, that's not the level of a person just just has a spirit and it needs to be cast out. This is, she required some of the highest level deliverance that most people would ever see. So, it's absolutely no fault of the pastor. Most people don't experience that level of a need for deliverance. So I so commend him on pressing forward, because he brought you to this place of, I'm saying yes, but not knowing how deep the process would go. So take us a little farther.
After that church service, he had actually asked a bunch of us to come back, I think, during that week to sit down and talk. And he would listen. I'd tell things. And then he would literally look at me like a deer in the headlights. Like, oh, my gosh, what have I just got into?